Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, May 24th, and this week, Prop 22 is on the line. Uber decides to stay, and drivers see through the pricing. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greeny. Bryant, happy, crazy-looking Friday.
Yeah, it is Friday. It's a little gloomy out here, but it's a holiday weekend, so I think the sun will come out for all of us if we just give it another couple days.
Yeah, if you are driving in Chicago right now, looking outside, it looks like a major storm's coming, so certainly drive safe. But yeah, Memorial Day weekend, so hopefully, like Bryant, you said, it's sunny and bright and hopeful. Which hopefully these stories will be bright and hopeful. Let's see. We're going to dive right into it. We're going to start with the first story here. This is what we're calling Prop 22's final test. And the fight against Prop 22 has hit its final test. This is from San Francisco Gate. They reported on Tuesday the California Supreme Court heard oral arguments regarding the constitutionality of the 2020 law that classifies Uber and Lyft drivers as independent contractors rather than full-fledged employees. So the driver, Hector, watched it all from the middle of the courtroom. The Antioch driver is the lead plaintiff for this years-long bid to overturn Prop 22, and his litigation is now finally reaching an end. They said he was wearing a tired but hopeful expression and a gig worker's rising shirt. He also went on to say, "The drivers, we are suffering," and he argued saying Uber and Lyft lied to the public about how the initiative would affect gig workers. Drivers for gig companies don't have adequate sick days, pay or workers' compensation, and benefits, etc. So, Bryant, this law came into effect years ago, and like I said, this is kind of a last stand to see if it'll change.
It's really interesting that it's taken this long to get up the court system. Obviously, litigation takes time and appeals take time, but here we are with so many workers having. Tapping into these benefits, really seeing how they benefit or don't the driver, and having an opportunity for everybody to see whether what Uber promised is actually what played out. It's impossible to predict how the court is going to rule. We can't say whether they're going to allow the law to stand or strike it down, but what we can do is look over the last few years and state with certainty are not in the best position. They're not in a position that Uber promised. I do tend to agree with the driver plaintiff who's saying that Uber sold the public a bill of goods, and it didn't pan out the way that they promised. I can remember the campaigns that they put on the Uber app, that they were sending emails to passengers saying, fight for your drivers. This is a good bill that's going to put extra money in the driver's pockets. It's going to protect them. And it's not just Uber, but into passing a bill that was more beneficial to the company than it was to the worker. And this plaintiff is obviously fed up with that, hoping to see that it changes, and we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Prop had just passed. I mean, we were getting calls from drivers who, were just kind of complaining that they just had no rights. They had no way to fight back on anything. And I often told them at the time, I go, look, unfortunately, a lot of this is due to Prop 22. I'm sorry, there's not really much that we can do. And a lot of drivers said, well, I actually voted for it. And I would just say, well, unfortunately, you voted against your own interests for a lot of what you're discussing about your concerns. So yeah, I don't know if you think this will go any further, or if you think this will just kind of end here.
Yeah, I think once the Supreme Court decides whether it can stand, that if the Supreme Court allows it, then yes, Prop 22 is the law of the land, and California gig workers will be bound by it. If the Supreme Court strikes it, then I would imagine there's going to be a lot more talk about, well, what will replace Prop 22? What sorts of benefits can we talk about now? Is there a minimum wage that provides a better floor? Are there more benefits that we can provide to drivers? Um, I think that those talks would immediately pick up in the same way that we see in other jurisdictions around the country, be it in Seattle, Minneapolis, you name it.
Right. Yeah. So, we'll see. Obviously, we'll keep updating everyone on that as it progresses or what the final verdict is. The next story here may be the last time we talk about Minnesota for a while because it appears Uber is staying in Minnesota. So after a new deal is reached, Uber decided to stay in Minnesota. And this is from the Yahoo Finance, and they reported, quote, the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, said he will sign into law a bill that ends the threat of Uber and Lyft leaving the Twin Cities area and sets a statewide compensation rate for ride-hailing services. The deal with lawmakers over the weekend is that he would give drivers a statewide 20% raise from his current compensation levels, which are not set by law. So apparently, according to the analysts, the per mile rate under the city ordinance would have been $1.50 plus a 51-cent per minute charge. The analyst says the hourly take-home pay after expenses and taxes would have been about $28.35, with pre-expense earnings at $43. Now that's compared to the final agreement is about $1.28 per mile, 31 cents per minute. It yields it at about basically $19.89 an hour. So I did see, Brian, Molda, which I was a big part of championing this. They were pretty excited by it. But I will say it's certainly not as – looks like both sides won this, to be honest.
Yeah, it was definitely a compromise. I am proud of the drivers in Minneapolis for continuing to fight the way that they did. It was really important for them to stand up and better conditions. They just secured a raise, which is obviously important. It's going to help drivers maintain a certain lifestyle and know that they can pay their bills. In the same vein, we would have loved promised by the state government or the city government. They had a law passed. They were ready to accept that law and have it signed by the mayor, and then Uber and Lyft step in and threaten to leave and ultimately get a better deal for themselves. So certainly there's a benefit here. Certainly we're happy with the fight, but I would have liked to see the drivers get everything that they actually initially achieved when the legislators passed the bill that they did. So the compromise is what it is, and we'll have to see in a couple of years if drivers are satisfied with it.
Right, like I said, I brought this up before. I guess I'm just still perplexed on how they fought for something. Mayor said no, they over vetoed it. It got into law, and then somehow it turned into, well, that's not really the law. We're going to redo it. It still blows my mind that even happened.
Right, they really backtracked it. I think how powerful there's few companies who can change existing law by just spreading the lead. Once a law, they have to deal with the law. This has been the Uber and Lyft MO for their entire existence. If they don't like the law, they just refuse to abide by it, and put their own interests before the community's. So
right.
I'm frustrated with the process. I'm frustrated that the drivers won and then had to compromise later. But at the same time, as we were just saying, let's celebrate the fact that they won a raise.
Right.
They started with and they achieved great success. They ears, the hearts, the minds of the Minneapolis government. They got the governor to step in and say, look, not only are we going to negotiate for one city in our state, we're going to negotiate for every driver in our state. And ultimately, the state law is going to beat the city law. So, the state wins, and there we go. We've got a 20% raise. Let's celebrate that.
Which is true, which is certainly great to hear. Certainly great that it's happening. So, yeah, a nice positive spin on it for sure. And it is a win. Ultimately, it's a win for drivers. We're going to end with our final story here. Uber surge is all the time, is what drivers in London are claiming. They say that Uber's surge pricing never ends, and this was first reported on 9 to 5 Mac. And they reported, quote, drivers are protesting outside Uber's London headquarters, claiming that so-called dynamic pricing is just in effect 24/7. Additionally, they told Wired that where Uber used to take a fixed and transparent 25% commission on the amount paid by riders, with drivers receiving the balance, the company now sometimes takes much higher percentages and doesn't allow them to see the split. Now, to prove the point, they have been logging in as riders to request rides, seeing how much they are quoted, and then how much the driver is offered. In one example, the rider was quoted about $58, while the driver was only offered $33. So that means Uber was taking a 43% commission. So, Brian, you and I talked about this before the podcast. You know, I will say drivers in London, Uber drivers in London, they're very good at not just protesting what Uber does, but they come with receipts, and it's pretty impressive.
It really is. I'm impressed with what they're doing and the fact that they can prove the missteps. It forces companies like Uber and Lyft to respond. It provides ammunition if there's litigation as a result of it.
Brian, we might have lost you there. I think the weather is causing some chaos on your end. Are you still there? Can you still hear me?
I am here. Can
okay.
You hear me?
Yes. You cut up pretty bad there.
Oh no, yeah. The weather is bad here in Chicago.
Yep.
So as I was saying, the drivers in the U.S. often see these similar issues with the app. They see shady behavior, but they don't always come with, as you said, the receipts to back it up. Those receipts are very important when it comes to litigation, when it comes to forcing Uber and Lyft to negotiate or fix problems. So I really appreciate what they're doing in London and having the evidence to support their claims. Ultimately, what we're seeing in London is something that's not new, and it's a lack of transparency. Back in the day, as the story alludes to, Uber and Lyft had set percentages. They were very clear as to this is what the driver earns, this is what the passenger was charged, this is the fee that we're taking out here, here, and here. And now it really just seems to be, one, much less transparent. Two, there's a lot of shifting in terms of the fees that are taken out, the percentages that the company's taking, when the passenger is ending up paying a lot more and the driver's not getting nearly as much. There's just a lack of consistency and transparency that's really troubling. It's not a new story, but it's certainly one that deserves our attention.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll see how this progresses. Obviously, they're protesting and explain, look, we got receipts. A lot of times what we've seen, especially in London and in Europe, usually Uber just kind of throws their hands up and goes, yeah, you're right, sorry. So we'll see how they respond to this one. But interesting, like you said, you really kind of need that, especially if you want to fight back legally. And they got it, which is impressive. All right, well,
they got it. And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I was just going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if with that proof, we see some class action lawsuits. Because when you have evidence, you have the ability to go to the court and say, we were wronged, here's the proof of it, make what was wrong right. And that means...
Right. No. Yeah, you cut out at the end there, but no, exactly. That's a potential opportunity, which obviously I hope they get, which would be great. Before we head off into the weekend, Brian, I'll give you the final say here. If you can chat through the storm that's heading our way.
Yes. Before the weekend here, and particularly with the bad weather that we're experiencing, we are focused on rideshare accident and injury law. We are happy to provide free consultations to anybody who suffers any damages, whether bodily injury, wage loss, pain and suffering, you name it. Is the best way to find our contact information. And please do not hesitate to contact us. Time is of the essence to set a solid foundation for your claim.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Brian. And I think you cut out there, but it was legalrideshare.com is the best way to reach us. And, of course, our phone number, 312-767-7950. Well, thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.